I expect that people of my generation will always see World War II as the great modern watershed of change. Hitler was defeated, fascism was destroyed, socialism advanced into the center of Europe, the Chinese Revolution followed, the colonial empires came to an end. What greater change could there be than this? We should be allowed our vanity. But by any measure, a vastly greater change occurred with World War I. When this cafe in Krakow was still relatively new and a favorite resort of intellectuals at the time, it was in World War I that political systems that had been centuries in the building came apart, sometimes in a matter of weeks. Before World War I, the traditional rulers and the capitalists had no doubts about their future. They thought they were forever. And socialists had no doubts about socialism. After World War I, nothing was ever so certain again. The age of uncertainty began. World War II, in a certain sense, was the last great battle of World War I. What came unglued in the First World War was a social order and a structure of government. Here in Poland, as elsewhere in Eastern Europe, land was still the vital source of power. The traditional landed families were politically dominant. Kings and emperors still ruled. Capitalism and capitalists were a minor force. It was a structure that shared power between the ancient rulers and the landowners on the one hand, and the new capitalists, businessmen, on the other. In the industrial countries, with the exception of Britain, farmers and peasants rivaled, usually exceeded in number, the industrial workers. Krakow, and this part of Poland, then belonged to the Austro-Hungarian Empire. A few miles away, the Russian Empire began. Imperialism and colonialism are words that we have come to associate with Asia and Africa and Latin America. But here in Eastern Europe, there was a much more comprehensive, intimate kind of imperialism. It was like that of the English in Ireland, and it involved the same kind of refined hatreds. Here, the colonial people were often the equal in education and cultural development of their masters. Often they were superior, or so regarded themselves. All were white, at least when washed. Few felt they should be ruled by others. Almost everyone ruled the Poles. Krakow, as I've said, was ruled from Vienna. Warsaw was ruled from St. Petersburg. Poznan, an ancient center of Polish culture, was ruled from Berlin. The Russians ruled Latvians, Lithuanians, Estonians, Finns. Besides the Poles, Austrians ruled Bohemians, Slovaks, Ruthenians, Croats, Italians, and many others. It was here in Eastern Europe that the great modern retreat from imperialism began. However, in 1914, it was not the subject people that were the source of uncertainty, fear. The Tsar and the others felt secure. The fear was of rival rulers, of the ambition for the territory that had always meant wealth and power. Austria was known to want something in Serbia, and Russia in Turkey, and Germany in France. And the British seemed always to be picking up territory somewhere. Out of these fears had come the alliances. Austria allied herself with Germany, got the industrial support, military discipline she needed. Austria gave in return her polyglot manpower. Russia reached out to France for subsidies, help in building her railroads and industry. From Britain, Russia got the sea power she lacked, maybe also a moral sanction for her despotism. Britain and France saw in Russia a vast supply of armed manpower. This led to the many references early in World War I to the Russian steamroller, a steamroller that was to roll principally on Russia itself. I suppose there's no subject known to history that has been so much debated as the causes of World War I. Maybe great events can have simple causes. Lloyd George thought that the great powers simply stumbled into the war. The rivalry, the competition for European and overseas markets between German and British capitalism is almost invariably cited and is believed by all scholars of decently subtle mind. Although similar competition seems not to cause so much trouble now, there is a better explanation. Since the beginning of historical experience, land and men have been the basis of princely wealth and power. The extent and quality of his land was what determined the wealth of a prince or a ruler. The extent and quality of the land was what determined the number and perhaps also the quality of the soldiers that he could muster. Thus his wealth, and thus his military power, and thus of territory, the territorial imperative. This belief in land and men was part of the deepest instinct of the old ruling houses of Eastern Europe, as one would expect. It was still a factor between France and Germany. Between the Habsburgs and the Romanovs, it was vital, perhaps I should say mortal. So each ruler eyed his neighbor with suspicion. Each believed that he wanted the territory that was thought decisive for wealth and power. Each had immensely detailed mobilization plans developed over decades, and these, as might be expected, envisaged thoughtfully that the fighting would be on someone else's land. No one, and certainly not the rulers, gave much thought to political and social consequences. There had always been wars. The ruling class had always survived, and so they would again. The trumpeter still recalls in Krakow the battle of Christian Europe against the Tatar invader. That was a wonderfully simple war game as compared with 1914. The act of mobilization, as I just said, envisaged an intention to take up a position on someone else's land. The other countries knew this intention. Their response was to mobilize as a precaution. But mobilization assumed attack. So once mobilization started, everyone was an aggressor. Everything was in danger of getting out of control. Those who could mobilize most rapidly attacked first. Those who were attacked defended, called on their allies to attack. Historians have always spoken of a chain reaction.